Okay, well, welcome everyone to our last Monday marketing chat. It's the last Monday in January, which means we're talking about are you already behind in setting your goals for the year?
Yep. Yeah, I feel like I am.
I was going to say, Paige, do you have any goals set for the year?
I do. I actually do have quite a few goals set this year, but I think I went a different tactic this year where I went with like overall life goals instead of specific to this year goals. Usually I start the year with like, all right, I want this much income and this many clients, and I have very specific things that are not necessarily based on anything besides just like I will be happier with my business if I just, fill in the blank. Like if I just break $100,000, I feel like that's a big one for most people. Like if
Mm.
I'm just a six-figure photographer, then I'll be happy. If I just have, 10 clients a month or 20 clients a month or whatever this arbitrary number is that we've deemed like this gold standard in our minds, like that's what's going to make us happy. And this year I went the other way with it, where I made a vision board with my 9-year-old and I said, like, these are the things that I want. My husband was like, you're not going to get all those things this year. I was like, of course not. Like, because I had like
Vision.
remodel the kitchen and like stuff like that. And he's like, yeah, we're not doing that this year. Like,
It's
I
a
don't know.
vision. It's not,
But
yeah.
like one of those, like, I want it in the next 5 to 10 years,
Yeah.
This isn't a general feeling of what I want out of my life more so than I
So
must make this much money or have this many
yeah.
clients.
Well, and I think the problem with those, I definitely remember the year where I said, I want this to be the one where I hit the 100,000 or more kind of number. And that started with a smaller, I want to hit over 10K months and, kind of escalating up. But I think with a lot of these things, they come from somebody else saying that that's a thing you want. So you
Yeah.
hear it and you think, well, that's the thing that that successful photographer has done or copywriter or whoever it is. And therefore, that must be a goal that I want because I want to be successful like they are. And I think we often don't connect that with does that work for us? Is that our goal or is that somebody else's goal? And like, what happens if we reach their goal? If our life is not like theirs, then maybe that's not what we actually want.
Yeah, and I think that it all comes down to like how you have your business built. It's like, people always say like you shouldn't base your pricing on somebody else's pricing that you just see out there. Like if you type in newborn photographer Boise, I shouldn't put my price at whatever the next person is because I have no idea what her overhead is, what how much time she spends with each client, what's her client experience like, what does it actually cost her to do a session? All those things. Like I have no idea what those things are. So for me to say, oh, well, I'll just charge the same as her. Well, I'm not taking any of my own things into account. So, what is my goal is not necessarily someone else's goal.
Yeah.
Like,
And I think we often don't know what's going on behind the scenes of a business. So I remember the first year that I wanted to hit 100,000 and I did. And in fact, I was over 10K months and I was really excited about that. And I actually went through a kind of program, which another copywriter taught on how to achieve that. And it really helped me. Like I absolutely hit the goal. But I remember afterwards she said, oh, well, can I interview you? Because I'll be using it like to use it as a kind of testimonial for future courses. And as I was describing what I'd done, and I think I hit something like 130 that year, she said, "You don't have any people, you don't employ any assistants, you do all that on your own, and you only work till 3 o'clock every day." And it was at that point where I thought, oh, this is really hard work. Is it not this hard work for everybody else? And it's because they were employing junior copywriters and they were employing VAs and assistants. So they maybe were bringing in the same amount of income, but they had a lot more expenses than I did and a lot more support.
yes.
And that was
Well,
the
you
point.
and I have talked about that a lot of like the whole idea of like, you see these like course creators that are like, oh, we did $7 million in course sales. And you're like, oh, it's incredible. Like, I want to know how to do that. And then come to find out they spent 6 million on ads and had 500,000 in all their like workers' salaries and everything. And so they actually only profited 500,000 on this $7 million sale. So it's like, well, what is this really? I mean, this is going to get way into like more like profitability sort of stuff, but what does it actually look like for you time wise? And like, what does that dollar actually cost you? Like how much you actually bringing in
Right.
to
And
make
I
it work?
I like the idea of you thinking of your vision board of what you want in your life because you have to know what do you want in your business sort of depends on what life you want, like bigger picture life. So
Yeah.
to hit 100,000 involves you working 14-hour days. Is that what you wanted? Would you be better either to earn less money or go work somewhere else just and be paid as an employee? Like, are you actually getting the life you hoped you wanted if you make
Yeah.
some kind of external goal about, how much you're going to bring in?
I think a lot of photographers also make that mistake, especially early on when they're like, well, I need to say yes to this job because I need to make the money and I need to, and I know that for some people that is absolutely true. Like you have bills or something going on where you have to say yes. But if you have the leisure availability to say no, it is really interesting how much like the stuff you actually want comes to fruition when you say no to the things that you don't want. Um, and we were kind of talking before we started this. It's the in 2023, I had my best sales year to date. And I thought I going into, I remember in January of that year, my husband and I had this sit down talk about, what's the year going to look like? And he had a really unique situation with work where he knew he wasn't going to make as much money as he had in years past. And we knew it was going to be temporary, but we're like, all right, how do we make up for that loss of income so that we don't really have to change our lifestyle and our kids' lifestyle while we're in this spot? And and so I was like, all right, if I could just have 8 to 12 newborns a month, I will be so happy and it'll be great. And like, even if if I have a really low sales average, even if they're only spending $1,000, like everything's, I'm making 8 to 10 to 12 grand a month on those clients. And then if they make, at the time, my newborn sales average was about 2,400. So I was like, if they're really making, then I'm having like almost 25K months, which is great. Right. So in my brain, I was like, this is going to be awesome. Okay, this is my goal, this is what I'm going to do. And I worked my butt off and I did all kinds of things to like bring in the clients. And there were a couple things that happened. One, when I worked that hard, I took on more clients that were lower paying clients.
Mhm.
So like
I
my
instantly heard
sales,
you say, even if they don't like buy as much, and what that instantly opened the door for you to have clients who are not buying as much.
yes. Yes, because I went into a quantity over quality mindset of like, if I can just get a ton of people in my door, then all that money will compile into what I actually need to make. And it did. And I like was able to bridge that gap for my family. But at the end of the year, I had this like cool number to show everybody, like, oh, look how much money I brought in. But I was miserable. And so, like, my kids were coming to look for me in my studio instead of in my bed at 6 in the morning. I was exhausted. I was so burnt out by just like not wanting to deal with any, like, I just didn't care. It was like, I don't want to do this anymore. It wasn't that I didn't want to take pictures. I still like taking pictures, but the admin work and the workflow side of it was so overwhelming because I was still very much trying to get those things in place of like, how do I make sure that everybody has the same experience all the way through? And how do I make sure that everyone gets the information they need when they need it? And, like all those, like, what email do I send? Like, what does it say? Like all those pieces of my business, I still feel like everything's always a work in progress. It's never perfect. But at the beginning of 23, it very much was. I was still
Well, and you
figuring
can
out.
imagine that if you had jumped from, say, 4 or 5 or 6 clients a month up to 8 to 12, it really stress tests any system that you have in place. And if you
Yeah.
don't start with the solid foundation of a system, you are trying to build systems off the back of being fully strained, constantly having to deal with client inquiries, and the unusual situations that come in are like on top of the regular things that you're having to deal with. So I can only imagine, well, I remember
Yeah.
you telling me the kind of like eye rolling of, oh, one more thing. It's just one more random email and I feel like I'm going to break.
Well, and I realized that I didn't actually, I surpassed my goal of 8 to 12 clients. And what ended up happening is I was saying yes to anything and everything. And I did like a book project and I mean, that was kind of fun, but the book project brought in a lot of lower paying clients that were like, we were averaging about 15 to $1,800 for those sessions, which was great. But like, not as high as my newborns, and they still took as much time.
Yeah.
And so there were things like that, we did some contests and some giveaways and like just to get people in the door. And so I think, I don't know, I'd have to actually go back and like look at how many clients I really did per month. But I think I was closer to like 20, which just felt like absurd when it all came down to trying to get that many done. I was actually in the airport this weekend and I was talking to this guy who's like, "Oh, what do you do?" And I was like, "I'm a newborn photographer." And he said, "Oh, how many clients do you serve each month?" I was like, "Oh, like I like to be around like 6 to 8 is good for me." And he's like, "Oh, so you're like very part-time." And I was like, "No." Six
Well,
to eight clients keeps me full-time.
yeah.
Like it's
And I'm
it's
going to guess
plenty.
that he was not a photographer
No, he
because
had no idea. Yeah,
I
he had
think
no idea.
it's the iceberg problem, right? Which is what somebody sees you do is the 2 to 3 hours that your session is, however long that session happens to be. And they
Yeah.
get some emails from you here and there, and they maybe speak to you on the phone once. And so in their mind, they're seeing maybe 5 or 6 hours of work that you're doing, but the actual reality is that there's way more than that happening in the background.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's the problem that most photographers have with trying to explain their value and like what they're doing for you. It's so much of it is not client facing because they don't see all the time that you put into setting up the studio before they arrive and cleaning up the studio after they're gone and prepping their images and every single little teeny piece that goes into those photo shoots.
Well, and I
That
think that's why you and I are building these templates and emails that we're selling for photographers because that part also nobody really values. So
yeah.
why be spending more time on that than you need to be? Like, is there anywhere you can cut corners on that stuff that clients don't really notice, but it
Yeah.
takes time out of your day? And if for one client, it's like, okay, we'll have to send some emails, but like, how many emails is it? And then if you multiply that by 6 clients a month or 20 clients a month.
It adds up like
What are you
crazy.
doing? Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know about you. You're probably not like this because you're a writer, and so you can figure things out faster. But I hem and haw over my emails so bad. If I like, especially for things like I have a client that's upset about something, or like it's a little bit of a sensitive subject, or like a pricing thing, or something that I want to make sure that I word it right so that they don't take it the wrong way. I will sit there and look at that email for so long and read it over and over and like make sure like, okay, is this really what I want to send? And I don't know, like having those templates and everything built out has made that part of my time go down like massively. Like I don't barely even think about it anymore. I like kind of glance at it. And because now I've sent them for 2 years, 3 years, 2 years, 2.5 years. I've sent those same emails that I know exactly what they say.
Yeah.
And so I know how to like quickly personalize it to like if there's something specific about their situation that I need to add or like their baby's name or something like that I want to quickly put in there. It's really easy because I'm so familiar with it. And that, I mean, obviously that comes with time, but like having those things built out and knowing what's being said, when it's being said, you don't have to think about what was sent to somebody. And then all of a sudden having that many clients doesn't feel as aggressive.
Well, and I
And you're
think
like, oh, I actually can't do this.
one of the big things that we noticed as we built that workflow for you of the emails that you need to send is thinking in advance of the things that people ask. So
Yeah.
so all in this, the problem once you get in a good workflow is you forget because people are not asking the questions that they used to ask when you were doing it before. They're not
Yes.
coming to you saying, what time again is it that we've to meet tomorrow? Oh gosh, that's actually in the middle of my baby's nap time. Like you don't even need to have that email because you've already made it very clear to them what the time is and they've known for weeks, hopefully, in advance at this
Yeah.
point of what time
Yeah.
is.
Well, and we had kind of talked about like this idea of like, this is the time of year to figure those things out because most photographers, and not everybody, and newborn photographers are maybe a little bit more stable this time of year because babies are born all year
Babies are
long.
born.
But people always spend too much money at Christmas, and then come January and February, they're just not as like
Open.
willing to spend their money
Mhm.
or able, I guess. So I feel like even if you're in a more stable industry, like newborns timeline wise, like you do still have those like ups and downs. And like we had kind of talked about this idea of like, well, what do you do in that downtime to set yourself up so that in the fall, like I always get slammed in like September, October, November because I still have my regular newborns, but then I have like the newborns of the past that have come back with their families and they want the Christmas card picture and everyone wants it right now. And can you do it this third weekend in October? Because that's when the fall leaves are the best. And, you know, you're scrambling around all of your other day, everyday life, you know, holiday things like getting back to school and, you know, birthday parties and holiday parties and all that sort of stuff that also make that time of year just
Yeah.
busier.
Yeah, in your real life. And I think it's silly not to forget how real life works. Like, I actually
Yeah.
have been thinking this year about only doing making plans for the quarter, but only for 10 of the 12 weeks. So I'm not going to fill the whole 12 weeks because every quarter there are a couple of weeks where it's Christmas or the kids are coming off for summer break or, you know, something else is happening. So it's silly not to reflect on the fact that December is a wild month for everybody in their personal life. And if you don't take that into account, you're just going to be busier by definition. And that
Yeah.
usually means that January is a bit of a lull and we have a bit more space because just generally there's less other life stuff going on than there, you know, than there is other times of the year.
Yeah, my husband just got this new calendar called the Big Ass Calendar, and it's like massive and it has the entire year all in one place.
Yeah.
And it's pretty cool, but it kind of reminded me I did this mastermind probably in 21 maybe where she had something, so it was on just a regular piece of paper, but it had the whole year, and she had us go through and say like, all right, I want you to take every single birthday, personal event, kids holiday, whatever, and just X it out. Like, you're not available to work that day. Exit out. Okay, now I want you to go through and say, like, all right, I want to take 2 trips, 3 trips, whatever it is that you want to do that year, and X those dates out like in advance. Just do it now at the beginning of the year, X them all out. And now look back and see, like, okay, how many dates do I actually have available? And what does that look like as far as like how many clients can I actually take?
Mhm.
And then take that and say, all right, I've got, you know, 50 dates throughout the year that I can take a client on, and I want to make $100,000. That means that I need to make $2,000 per client without taking into account like all my like overhead. So I actually need to make more than that, you know, whatever,
You have to
whatever
fill
the
all your
math is.
days. Like every date has to be full for that to work. That
Right.
you're
But it
available.
was a very interesting exercise because one, it forced you to block out those dates so that like that was the first year that I realized that I was missing things um like during the fall, I was like, oh well, I really want to take advantage of all these like this fall like surge. And so I want to say yes to everybody. So I better take all these Friday night, Saturday night, you know, Sunday morning sessions and just pack my calendar full because I'll be gone come November. Well, what I realized is like I'd have to like leave these, you know, football like watch parties with my friends, and I missed out on fall barbecue sort of things. And like,
I remember you coming to like birthday parties at our house where you
yeah,
had to nip away in the middle of
I gotta
it.
go.
Got to go and have a photo shoot.
Yeah. And I got to the end of that year and I went, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to work so that I can like I don't want work to lead my life. I want to like have work be this like thing that fits into my life, not the other way around, you know?
And I think
And
it's
so
all
that was
right to choose to work weekends if that, but it has to be like a choice that
right.
you've made rather than finding yourself, oh man, I just a couple of years ago I did a similar thing where I have my calendar open and it's different for me as a writer, but I have my calendar open and all my existing clients have access to book any time that they need a call. And I closed off Mondays and Fridays. Nobody can book a call with me on a
Yeah.
Monday, Friday. And it was life changing just to make that.
Yeah.
And still will sometimes take a call with a client, but I'm in control of whether I say yes or no to that. I don't like look at my calendar on a Sunday night and discover that I have four back-to-back calls the next morning. I have kind of
Yeah.
space to get into the week. And the same on a Friday when I know I might have to tidy deliverables up and send drafts to clients. I know that the calendar is going to be free and I haven't booked any time in for it. So making those kind of choices of like, what do you want your life to look like and how much time do you actually want to spend, importantly also on things that are not just the photo shoots but all the other parts that you have to do as a photographer that people don't see.
Yeah, I mean, I think like looking at it all in one space too, you can see like, especially if you're like aware of your own stressors. Like, I know that like I love to travel. I love to go and be gone and like go on these adventures, but too many in a row makes me like super overwhelmed because I just don't have that like downtime to get anything done. And that is part of my working hours is on the weekends. So like I will come over early in the morning on like a Saturday when I know my kids are going to sleep in and I'll leisurely edit for a couple hours, then I'll go over and make pancakes and like have my family morning. And I like that. Like I'm good with that. But if I'm gone for a weekend and I don't get that Saturday morning, all of a sudden the next week I have a couple hours of editing that didn't get done.
Yeah.
And then if we're on the following weekend, oh shoot, now it's compiled and now I've got even more. So it gets to the point where you're like I get super overwhelmed and like I've got to stay up late and I've got to get up early and I got to get all the other things done. And so it just gets really overwhelming. But when you look at it like that and you can say, okay, we're going to be gone, like we're gone the February 14th through like March 1st for gymnastics. Like my kids compete 3 weekends in a row, like boom, boom, boom. And I know that I'm going to be a psycho. Like I just can't, I'm not going to be able to get anything done. And so I blocked out a couple extra days those 2 weeks because I was like, or those 3 weeks, because I know that when we are home, those like couple days in between those weekends, I'm gonna need extra time. I'm gonna need to be able to work and edit and like not have an actual photo shoot those days to be able to catch back up
Yeah.
and keep my sanity. So when you look at it like that and you're like, okay, I can see those things that like really are going to be problems for me. You can plan ahead. And then all of a sudden, like those goals can be like actual goals instead of,
You're not falling behind because
yeah, it's more like,
you made an
okay, I have
unrealistic goal that you could never actually meet.
yeah, like I would much rather be like, okay, my goal, like I've looked at my calendar, I have 50 open dates. My goal is to fill 40 of them. And because I build, I'm gonna book 40 of them. Of that, I want to make this much money per client so that this is my actual revenue for the year. And now that number is like a thing that like lives in reality instead of just this arbitrary, like, I want to make $500,000 this year because wouldn't that be fun? It's
We'd
like,
all love
well,
it, but what's the path to it? Well, and I think the other
yeah.
thing, and it's probably worth us talking about the challenge that we're about to do right now as well, is that to know how much time you need to be able to say, oh, I'm about to do 3 back-to-back weekends away. And for you, I know that includes a Friday. So it's not back-to-back
Yeah.
weekends, it's back-to-back 3 days at a time. You need to understand what your workflow from beginning to end of a client involves so that you know I need X amount for editing, but I also need Y amount of time for administration, for sending emails, for like how many appointments do you need for going through the images with people? Like if you don't have a solid sense of all the things that you do in your business, you can't know what that extra time is that you need to hold special and make sure that it's there in your calendar. Um,
Well, and the other thing that we haven't really discussed on, in this chat at least, is if you get super busy during those times, which is what used to always happen to me in the fall. And I think this is another reason why January is so slow for most photographers, is they get super busy in the fall and they do all the things and they're trying to get through their client workflow, but they stop marketing and
Marketing.
they're not doing the push that, because when you're a little bit slower, you have time to get on Instagram and post and get, reach out to people and say hi and send an email here and there and like, go into the local boutique and meet and greet. Like all
Mhm.
that stuff is easier when you're slower. But if you don't do that when you're busy, all of a sudden you don't have clients for the next turn. Like you
And
get to the next quarter and you're like, wait, where is everybody?
yeah, well, and I think
But
the other
go
thing
like down in your hole.
you always try and remind yourself in January, and we often talk about, but it's hard, is that if you start marketing today, if you start doing all that today, it's probably like 6 to 8 weeks until that shows its impact on your calendar. So you can't say today, oh gosh, I'm really quiet, let me see, drum up some marketing. I mean, some people can maybe, but probably not in a consistent way. So you don't necessarily have to do this, but a lot of people who do marketing would say you must schedule into your calendar every week time to do marketing, however
Yeah.
busy you are, if you want it to continue. Or maybe you accept that you don't do a lot of marketing in the fall. but you have to be okay with the end result of that, which is you're going to have a
Yeah.
quiet January.
Yeah, I mean, I think that that's part of like I don't mind having a little bit of a quiet January, but we have some things in place now that have helped with that. One of the things is that now we run Google Ads, which like I somebody else does them for me. So like it's an expense that like a lot of photographers wouldn't be at the point of like wanting to pay that much money for it, but we're at that point now where like I my pricing can support that. Like we're busy enough that I can support that extra amount. And that has helped quite a bit bring in those like regular leads for belly to baby sort of maternity newborn sort of things. But we also have like we do a chunky baby contest in January, February every year, and that brings in a little bit of extra income. So there's like ways around it. But I was going to come back to the chunky baby contest because this is back, like circling back to the whole like doing things early so that you're not doing them on the fly. Is every year I get to this point of the year and I go, oh shoot, I was super busy in the fall that I didn't do any of the prep work for chunky baby. And now I got to do it as I go.
Yeah.
And when you do it as you go, all of a sudden you're super busy and crazy and like don't do as good of a job as you maybe would have if you'd given yourself the time to do it. So this is a statement of learning not don't do what I do and actually do things in advance so that you're not doing them. Like what I need to do is actually get all of my things like I have them from years past. So now it's getting a little bit easier, but I need to get all my things organized in one place so that when I do these chunky baby contests, it's not a matter of like finding, oh, where was that Canva template design that I did last year? Let me go back and try and find it. It's all in one place. And that would be
There's
that's a
always
goal of
things.
mine this year to organize those marketing campaigns and like structured things. Because really when it comes down to it, all of those events are the same as like a newborn event, right? Like, like when you're taking a newborn client, it's like, how do they reach you? What's that first lead step? After the lead step, what does it look like once they've booked with you? After they've booked with you, what does it look like leading up to their photo shoot and then after their photo shoot and then their product delivery, whether it's digital or like actual tangible products? And then how do you follow up with them afterwards? So those are like all the steps, stages of life of a client, right? Whether it's a newborn session or a contest or a giveaway or a model call or anything, it doesn't matter. But you still have to figure out what those pieces are. And if you do it in advance, it's a lot easier.
Right? And that's what you need to do now. Maybe when we do the challenge, you can be doing it, but for chunky baby.
I know. I
Very,
think that's a good idea, actually. I like that a lot.
definitely. Well, the other thing I was thinking is that part of what we sell in the templates, and you can do this yourself, or if you get our templates, some of it will be done for you, is that what happens when you get a lead in? How does a lead arrive into your business? So if you have a website which has a contact form on it, and someone sends off the contact form, or they DM you on Instagram, or however that is that you sometimes get leads in, if you do not have an automated process for that and you're really busy, you might miss that email that comes in or that DM that comes in because you're absolutely slammed. Your clients are DMing you on Instagram because they want to know why they haven't heard about this, that, and the next thing, and you just miss the lead. I definitely know before I had automated systems, I had missed leads that had come in before. So
Well, you
if you
also like sorry to interrupt, but you'll also lose that lead if you're too slow to respond.
yeah, if you're
Even
not
if you're really good about it, but you're like, oh, I'm out of town for the weekend, and somebody sent me an email on Thursday night. I left on Friday morning, didn't see it till Monday morning. That client's probably already found another
you have to
photographer.
find somebody else,
Yeah.
definitely. And even if you are doing it manually and you see it come in, but if you see it come in and you know that you've got two back-to-back photo shoots still to do that day and some editing for the one that you did earlier in the week and you know they need the photos back because you're deep in the fall time, like you could go do it, but it's now midnight till you can hit your laptop, and now you have to open your laptop and go and answer that inquiry. Like, are you at your best for writing that email? Do you know what you're going to say to them? So by having thought about all those places and automating when leads come in, how you respond to them, giving them all the information they might ask for without them asking first, having it all ready and just being sent to them without you needing to get involved, makes it that if there are leads that trickle in the times when you're not marketing so heavily, you're at least making the most of them and hopefully
Yeah.
convert them.
Well, and it's like, I think you called this chat the lazy photographer's guide to like, and that's exactly like, it sounds like a lot of work and it is to like get it all set up, of course. But then once it's set up, it is kind of lazy because you're like, I
Mhm.
don't have to do anything. I'm telling, like I've only done it once and then now I don't have to do it again because that client's getting what they need. They know what the next step is, whether it's like, I want to get you guys on a phone call so we can chat about this, or here's my direct book online, read this, thing about my pricing, whatever it happens to be. Like if I can just do it once,
Yeah.
then I don't have to do it over and over again. And all of a sudden, that stress of those clients is, minimized by
Yeah.
a
Because I think we
ton.
all know that feeling of, oh, a DM came in and I know I should reply, but I have to go find the link to my website. What is the address? Oh, and I need to go, I should really find that form that they do, but oh, I can't find that right now. I'm in the grocery store. I can't find it. I'll put this down. I'll come back to it later. And you either forget to come back to it later, or they saw that you left them on red, dot, 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 and then you disappear and you don't come back. Like, what impression is that giving someone as a first impression?
I also feel like, I mean, maybe this is maybe going too tangenty, but like I feel like when you respond in those ways, you lose some of your professionalism
Hmm.
because you are responding in the middle of the grocery store or while you're trying to make dinner and a kid is screaming at you or pulling on your arm or like, "Oh, I'm just going to send this one thing, guys, stop. Hold on." And you're like yelling at your kids trying to get stuff done. Sometimes you do like miss an opportunity or you misread something they sent or like I just think that sometimes those things become like I didn't write that the way that I really wanted to because I wasn't thinking it through all the way because I was not in the headspace.
Or
And
for me,
so
it's getting typos in as a writer, or saying you
yeah,
attached something and then having to go back because you actually forgot to attach it. Like all those things, like one of those things doesn't really matter, but if there's multiple of them in a row, people start to question, like, who is this? Like, is this a business that I want to
yeah.
work with?
Is she actually professional? Yeah. Does she know what she's doing? And well, and I think also when you're talking about a couple $100 service, it's a little bit different than when you're talking about a couple $1,000 service. People expect that level of professionalism where like you're not being like, "Hey, yeah, we'll figure it out. Don't worry."
Yeah.
Like, no, I want a response that says like, "Yeah, no, we like to see babies at this age and this is how we schedule them," and like a very well thought out response rather than a quick like reply with no signature at the bottom. Like
And although
people
you might
notice.
not realize this, like you're very good at taking your photos, but if somebody doesn't know you yet, then what any professionalism or not that they see is reflected in their idea of the photos that you might produce for them in potentially months to come. So all they're seeing about your professionalism right now is the emails that you're sending and the DMs that you're sending. And you can know you're going to do great pictures, but they don't know that at that point. So you have to provide the trust for them that you are a professional and you're good at your job and you know what you're doing from the very first time you contact. And unfortunately for you photographers, that's going to involve a lot of communication. So if that's not your strong point, figure something out, have somebody write it for you, use our templates, or take your time and write them all one way at the beginning so that you don't have to think about it every time somebody asks you to write an email. You just can send an automated reply.
Well, and you can also do that like not that I say think you should do this on the go, but you can in regards to like certain like 911 situations. Like if you have to respond to, like I have this like done twice list and like if I have to do something more than once, I save that reply because I know that a similar situation is going to come up and I constantly add to my workflow because of that. Like if I notice everyone's asking like what time their session is or something like that, I'll know that like I'm not sending that information early enough or repeating it enough because they don't seem to be getting it. So maybe there needs to be another email in here that like reiterates again. Maybe it goes right away. Maybe it's not even an email. Maybe it's a link to a client like folder with all your stuff or something like that. Something that's like fixing that hole in your communication that's getting people to ask you stuff. And we've talked about that quite a lot where like what is it that you're doing wrong that's causing people to ask those questions? And
And it's
usually it's because you communicated well enough,
Yeah.
or they didn't read well enough, or it hasn't been like sent at the right time. So like you sent it too early and they went, oh, I don't need that yet.
And
And
now
then when they do need it, they can't find it. So now they're asking for it. And like paying attention to when those issues come up helps that whole workflow be so much easier. Then you don't spend all that extra
yeah.
time.
Well, and because you can think in your mind, I did this perfectly, it's not me that's at fault. But if multiple people are asking the same question, it doesn't matter how you feel about it. There is some issue that, as the reader, as a busy uh, parent to a brand new baby, you're not picking up on at the right time, as you say. So you have to
Yeah.
kind of take your ego out of it and be like, if it's just a one-off, it could be like some wild client who hasn't read it and it's definitely not your fault. But if it's happening more than one time in the client is all right, always right mentality, it's probably a you problem, whether you think it's a you problem or not. And you can choose not to fix it. You can say, this is really not a me problem, but you're going to have to answer those emails time and time again. So why not?
Yeah.
You don't need to do that.
Well, and I think that like a lot of times people, photographers, business owners are like, well, I don't want to annoy them. So I don't really want to like reach out over and over and over. But as a consumer and as like someone who uses services, I like reminders. I like a, hey, this is what time your appointment is. This is what you need to bring to your appointment. Like, I know I've already told you this, but let me tell you again,
Oh
like, if
yeah.
I already know, I just dismiss it and I go,
Yeah.
oh, great. Okay.
And I think
Yep.
it's really worth thinking about this the next time you go through purchasing something. Like, I can't tell you how often I have got a reminder about something and I've left it in my inbox. And then it comes to the day or the day before, and I'm like, oh, I need to go find that email because I need to figure out when that is. But by this point, it's now maybe 20 emails down in my inbox. And then I open it up and a fresh reminder has come in. And my response to that is great. I don't need to go and find that email reminder from 3 days ago, which is now lost, because here's a fresh one. This is exactly the information I was looking for. So if you think about it with the purchaser's like mind, you can often find that those things are not as much of a bother as you imagine they might be.
Yeah, well, and I think that sometimes photographers like don't think of themselves as like a true business. Like they think of, like, oh, I do photo shoots, whatever. But like if you think about yourself as a business, if somebody buys something from you, they're usually getting a receipt, right? So it's like if they go onto your website and they book a session with you and they pay for it and then they don't hear anything, you're for sure going to get an email and be like, hey, I think I booked this, but like, I don't know what
Right?
time do I need? Like, there's going to be so many questions, right? So when you think about it in that regard, like if you paid for something online and then got nothing from the company, you'd be like, did I order that
The
right? Did my
scam.
credit card go through? What is this? Yeah. So like, I want to know like what exactly, I want a reiteration of what I've purchased. I want to know like what's the next step, what's happening, like people want that information. Even if they're not going to sit there and like read it word for word for word, which we know they don't, but like at least they have it and you can say, I provided you this information. You know exactly what's going on. If you want it, here it is. And then as you get closer, those, like even like I feel like most of the time now, like, you order something from Amazon, and it comes the next day. So you don't really think about like when I ordered it and when I received it because it's so fast. But every once in a while you order from a brand that like doesn't have that really fast shipping and you'll be like, wait, I ordered that, right? Like, where is that? And then you go back and look for it and it'll just say like, we've received your order and you haven't seen anything new from them in 2 weeks. And you're like, wait, has it shipped?
And
Is it
like,
still?
how long will it take? Is it coming today? Should I hold on?
Yeah.
Is it just about
And
to?
that like almost always makes me like, I don't want to work with this company again. I don't want to order from
And
them.
it
They
makes
have
you
created
nervous
it.
about if they're gonna deliver, literally if they're gonna deliver or not. So
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, I think that getting back to the goals stuff, it's like my goal is to do even more of that this year of like streamlining my systems so that things like Chunky Baby are all in one place, all ready to go, and can easily be updated year after year. And then creating more of these things that like I've created for other newborn photographers with you and me, just like trying to make this stuff easier for people because the more that we can be lazy about it and like have it automated, but then also be like, because the thing is like, yes, you're being lazy, but you're like so much better and more professional. And, you know, like people are going to appreciate it so much more because they see you as this like person that has their stuff together. Like, oh, she knows exactly what she's talking about. She knows what time to be here and what time they start. And she has rules and boundaries. And, you know, like
Yeah.
it's not just some willy-nilly, oh yeah, well, what time do you want to do your photo shoot?
Mhm.
Like there's
Exactly. Like you're
there's
telling them. And I think that often people don't even really realize that. They won't notice and appreciate that, but they sure will notice if they don't get it and they start to feel nervous and uncomfortable.
yeah.
And so you're just taking away a negative thing and replacing it with almost nothing, which to them feels like no friction. So when they're asked at the
Yeah.
end how it was to work with you, they'll be like, great, because the only bits they remember is the photo shoot and the delivery of the
Yeah.
image. Whereas if what they remember is that they had to chase you 3 times and they didn't know at the last minute where they were supposed to turn up for their photo shoot, like those are the kind of things they remember about working with you rather than the great experience they had on the
It's
day.
also what they tell their friends
Yes.
about working with you. Like, oh, the photos are really good, but you know, I didn't really know. And
It's a hot
yeah,
piece.
like, yeah, yeah, you don't want that. You definitely don't want that out there. And then also, like, I mean, unless you're truly only a newborn photographer and you never do any kind of milestones or like continuation sort of stuff, like you still want to work with that family when they have their next baby
Mhm.
and like their friends have babies and like all those things. So it's kind of a long game in that regard where like if you screw up this one photo shoot, it's not just that one because then you have this thing out there that's like, oh, well, I dropped the ball for this family and then they told their friends that it was great except, you know, and so maybe don't hire
Maybe.
her, go to someone else. They're not going to come back to you for their next baby and then it's going to continue like that versus the opposite where like they had a great experience and I've had this happen before where someone has come to me, we've had a good experience. They've said, "Oh, I'd like to come back to you, but like, you know, it was really expensive." And like they haven't hired me for the next baby, which is always like, "Oh, shoot." And then they've come to me for the third baby because they're
Mhm.
like, okay, so we hired this other client and it was, you know, a lot of times it's not usually the newborns, it's usually like a family photo shoot or something. Like they'll come back and say like, "Oh, well, you're really expensive." And so we ended up hiring this other lady. But then they hire somebody that's like a all-inclusive couple $100 sort of thing that like to be fair, when you're that type of photographer, you don't have time, you can't do that level of hand holding
Mhm.
that a photographer that charges several $1,000s can do because you have to be fast. You have to work through things and like that's just not where your service level is. So I feel like
They see it.
those people like often will come back and be like, you know what, I actually do really value your expertise and the fact that you have everything and I didn't have to think about it and I knew exactly when to be where and what everyone was going to wear where, you know,
And
like
I think that's part of the lazy thing, honestly, is that it takes a lot of work to go out and find a client, either advertising, like your feet on the ground because you're going around stores and different places and talking about what you do or paying for ads. If you have one client and that rolls into their next baby and their next baby and their friends' babies and their sisters' babies, if you get like the potential to work with 5 or 6 or 7 different clients off that one client, like that's a lazy way to get business, but it's a great way to get business. I was just analyzing my client base for last year, and 99.5% of my clients were either referrals or repeat business. Like I had one client that was completely cold. Now, and I work differently to the way you work because of the kind of business I do. So I wouldn't really do ads anyway. But I did almost no marketing in terms of LinkedIn or on Instagram or any of the places where I've had to
yeah.
market in the past because all the business came from repeat clients or someone saying you should work with Jill on this thing. And so I didn't
Yeah.
have to do any marketing. It was
Well, I
great.
think it is a little bit more difficult for newborn photographers that truly want to photograph like most of their sessions being actual newborns because people only have so many babies. And so it is hard to get those families back again and again. And like for me, like once the youngest is about 6, I'm kind of like, ready to pass them to another photographer because I just don't enjoy it as much. Like I don't really love those like like my kids are totally in this middle year stage, so I love them dearly, but I don't generally love 9-year-olds. Like they're not my favorite. I much prefer like a 2, 3-year-old. And I really don't like photographing teenagers. Like, just no, thank you. It's not for me. Some photographers love it, and that's totally
Well,
their
and it's
jam.
also knowing where you sit. Like, you don't have to keep taking photographs of a family their whole life if you don't want
Yeah.
to. But you need to know where your sweet spot is. So for you, that heavy involvement with the family and holding their hand and directing them through what they need, that's what a family with a newborn really needs. And
Yeah.
that's what your sweet spot is. So yeah, it's
Yeah,
fine.
but what my point was that like you have to bring in new clients when you
Yes,
are being
regardless.
a newborn photographer. So if there's some way that you can get in with somebody that's going to refer you to friends that are also having babies, like that stuff's so massive because not only is it like getting you new clients, but it's also getting you new clients that understand your process at least to an extent. Because if somebody comes to me that's completely cold, they don't know anything about the way that I work. They may or may not have had any kind of experience, most of the time, not with a professional photographer, particularly one that sells the way that I do. And so they're going into this thinking they're going to spend a certain amount of money and not realizing it's actually going to cost this amount of money. And so you have to do so much client education with those like very, very cold clients. And sometimes they still turn into good clients. It's not that you can't, but somebody that comes from a referral from somebody who's already been there, I love it when people are like, she's great, but she's very expensive, just so you know. Like, that's my favorite thing that they
Yeah,
can say about me.
they've already
'Cause I'm
set
like,
the expectations.
good. Yeah, they're setting an expectation. They're coming in understanding that they're going to spend more money, but it's going to be worth it.
And they
And
have the trust because they've seen their friends' images and they know what
yeah,
they've seen the images on the wall. So again, if you're trying to sell them wall art, there's already a push through that barrier of like, do I really need to spend that amount of money on an actual piece of wall art? You're like, well, was it because of the piece of wall art you saw in your friend's house that persuaded you?
yeah,
Then that's why. That's what we're talking
yeah,
about. So I feel like before we finish this up today, we should maybe quickly explain what the challenge is that we're about to do, because
yeah,
we have referenced it a few times in the past hour, but we haven't really explained what it is. So,
yeah.
um,
Go for it. Tell them.
yeah, so we think that the what you've probably heard from all of this conversation is that you need to understand the bit of the iceberg that's below the water. What are all the things that you do for a client? What are all the touch points that are involved in working all the way from the beginning of a client to the end? And like how much time is that actually taking you? And you probably don't want to believe this, but you will start to see it as you analyze all your clients. There's a whole load of parts of that that are the same for every client, and they can be the same. And if something is the same for a number of clients, if it's like that rule of two that you were talking about, if you have to do it more than once, then you can automate it. You can create, if it's a communication of any kind, it could be some kind of guide of how what to expect from your studio. It could be how you put together clothes for photo shoots. It could be what to expect that you send out at the beginning as someone books in your contract and your invoice. If you can put all that together so you understand all the steps that you repeat and you only do that work once, then you can be the lazy photographer that doesn't need to spend the time on it
Mhm.
every single time you have a client, which you multiply up at 8 clients a month, and then that becomes whatever the math is on that times 12.
Yeah.
And also realistically, as we said today, maybe 8 a month is like your goal, but you know in the summer you're only going to take 4. So like let's be realistic about what the time's involved, and is it 8 every month or is what's my average across the year? So we're going to do a challenge where we work through the first part of that process. The first part of that process is figuring out what your workflow is and how long it's actually taking you. And then the second part of that is implementing repeatable emails that you send out
And
every
text.
time. Which, if you would like to skip the work on that one, you can buy our templates. But you do have to. You can use the challenge to figure out what your workflow is. Then you could go and pull all the emails you've ever sent and compile yourself a list of emails, templates of your own, and put those in. I mean, that's effectively what you and I, Paige, did when we first worked it out for Glean and Co. But
Yeah.
we know how much work that takes.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I was telling you this morning that like a couple years ago I hired this guy. I had a call with him and he does like automations and I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna have him automate my whole like CRM. I'm gonna get it all done." And he's like, "Okay, great. Like I can totally do that for you. I just need to know like what you want to send, when you want to send it, like what all those touch points are, and then the emails that go with them." And I was like, "Oh." And I got really overwhelmed. I actually never
All
ended up
the email. I
writing
remember you talking to
because
me after you'd had that call. You were like, "What does he mean, all the emails?"
yeah, I was so overwhelmed because I just hadn't thought about it as like this like unit of things that I needed and like a timeline and a schedule for everyone. And it felt so overwhelming to create it all at once. Which now, like now that we've broken it down, I think that like it's very easy to follow the steps, and that's what we're gonna do the whole week. We'll go Monday through Friday, with like little things each day that will help you build that out, so that it's not so like oh God, like panic inducing when you think about that. Like how could I possibly create all those things at once? And we're gonna teach you exactly how to basically build the outline of that. Like what's the first part, second part, third part and then of course, like you said, like we will have our email templates and text messages that you can buy to then fill in those spots, or you can write them yourself too at
Yeah.
the end. You
And
don't
the
have to buy our
challenge
stuff to be
works
able to.
if you know that you don't want to buy the templates, that's fine because you can, the first part will help you figure out which emails you need to send. You can go off and write them yourself at the end. So we're giving you like all that part to figure it out regardless of what you do in terms of creating the emails at the end. You can either skip that line and purchase or you can go through that work yourself. So yes, it's
Yeah.
not, you don't have to buy the templates for this challenge to work. You can absolutely do it all yourself if you would like to.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, and
Journal.
I think the only other thing that I would probably mention is everybody works a little differently, but when we wrote the templates, we have 12 different sets because we've thought about the different way that you might sell. So we have different types of selling methods, which affects your workflow, right, in terms of what you're doing for clients at different times and how formal you might be about interacting with your clients. So we have the templates are in, they're based on how Page works, but there's 12 different variations depending on how you sell and how formal you want to sound.
Yeah. Yeah. It's like that whole professionalism thing. I mean, they're all written in a professional manner, but there's a difference between that, like, more friendly tone of voice and your photo shoot will take place at, and that is very kind of stiff and formal. So, depending on where you fall on that, we can help you figure out, how to talk to your clients and which voice makes the most sense for your business.
Yeah. So we're going to end now because we're going to go and start thinking about the challenge and get it ready for you all. And we'll be emailing out when that's starting so that you know when it happens. It'll be like an email a day with a quick video to watch and then some homework for you to do to prep so that you're ready for the next day's video and for the next step that you need to walk through. And we'd love to
Yeah.
see you there if you would like to join us.
Yeah, for sure. And I hope everyone has some good, like, actual goals this year and maybe make that vision board because, figure out some goals that are going to be bigger than just a arbitrary, I
Mm.
want 10 clients a month or $100,000 this year, or whatever it happens to be.
Yeah, love that idea.
Yep.
Excellent. All right. And if we don't see you for the challenge, then we'll see you next month for last Monday marketing chat.
All right.
Bye.